it is my honor to be on this panel, and quite intimidating, actually. There's quite the lineup. We'll do some introductions here. And I know it's the third day, and it's after lunch, and it's post-Sherwin-Williams party, if that means anything. But we sure had a strong start with Jason Phillips, and this is a really tough gig to come in, bring it in strong here at the end, so thank you. The desire of our time isn't to just kind of chat. I think a good panel has a little rumble to it. I think a good panel has some contrarian views, and we hope to pull out, there's not really a right or wrong here, and there is obviously a few ways to get to the target and the destination. So that just gives you a clip of what we want to be about. Can I call on my friend Tara first for an introduction? Could you introduce yourself, who you're associated with, and your relationship to this panel?
Excellent. Thank you, Annie. Tara Riley. I'm currently with the Academy for Professional Painting Contractors, Brandon Lewis, many of you know. Formerly, I was president of Fresh Coat Painters, the franchise. And so my relationship, I think, to this panel is that I bring a unique perspective. I had to bring a lot of people into this business from scratch. And obviously, one of the most important things we had to do was teach people how to estimate profitably and sell. And so, we had a lot of unique challenges there. I now work with a lot of craftspeople and a lot of businesses, and production rates and estimating is a huge component of profitability. So that's what I bring.
I'm Tom Drost. I'm the founder of Estimate Rocket. My relationship to estimating is clear. Prior to Estimate Rocket, I had a business where basically I sold programming services, and it's all by the hour. And so production rates, even at that stage for me, were really important because I had to figure out ahead of time, how long is it going to take me to do this request that this person has asked me for with imperfect information that I may be receiving about exactly what they want. So we tried to incorporate that into what we built in Estimate Rocket to make it a tool that many, many users could use to incorporate their production rates into the system with, and therefore help them become more profitable by creating estimates that are profitable.
Thank you. Nick?
My name's Nick May. There we go. Sorry about that. I own a company called Walls by Design. We're about 60 miles north of here. I do not want anybody to fall in love with this beautiful weather that we have, because I don't need more competition. Anyways, my relationship to this panel is I've probably done over 25,000 estimates, or been responsible for over 25,000 estimates. And as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I remember back in college, this was a long time ago, back in the 90s, and I remember building my first spreadsheet so that I could systematize the process of estimating houses.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to pick on not a unicorn. True story, that's what his name tag says.
It's true. What's up, guys? My name's Eric. For the last 5 years, I've run a marketing company, so I'm one of the evil marketers, always selling you guys. But a little over a year and a half ago, I also started a painting business in Cleveland, Ohio. Most of our estimates are done completely virtually, like contract signed, deposit taken, 100% virtually. So I had to create a slightly different and contrarian way of estimating. So I guess that's why they put me up here. I don't know.
Oh, definitely. All right, Chad.
I'm Chad Jeffries with Brick City Painting. I've been estimating for several years now, but what I feel like I bring to the panel is my journey from residential to commercial. I had to learn a lot of changes and things like that. And it was important to do that, or it would have been a failure. So,
thank you.
Aiden?
My name's Aiden Smith. I'm with Paint Pro Coaching, and I just want to say I'm honored to be up here. This is my second PCA, and I just keep meeting awesome people, and it's been a journey for me, but like I said, just an honor to be up here with, my peers. I have coached, probably 150 painting contractors and helped them systemize their business with production rates. It's become like my favorite word over the last 2 years, and that's really helped people, look at pricing jobs and not guess anymore, right? So when you help them put that into their business, it's a game changer. They see results, and that drives me every day to help continue that.
That's really great. It was fun catching up and hearing your passion about it too. It really shines.
Thank you.
If you could lead us, Aiden, and we'll kind of reverse the order and go backwards. State, residential or commercial, and kind of what your target is. So as we're sharing here on the stage, we have context. Does that make sense? Because what Chad advises may sound very different than what you would have to say.
For sure. For sure. Can you give me that one more time? Sorry.
So you're residential, commercial, are you a blend? And just kind of speak to the target group you want to be speaking to here in size.
Oh, definitely mostly residential.
Okay, and about the size that you want to speak to?
I'd say 1.5 and under.
Okay, great. Chad?
We're mainly commercial. We're about $5 million a year. We're running 33 employees. So that would be the group that I would have the most to give to.
Great. And then can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Is that direct to owner on the commercial side, or is that new or a combination of repaint?
Mainly new. We do a
Mainly
lot
new.
of so hospitals, schools, stuff like that. I have not been able to break the commercial repaint. I went to the class, so hopefully I'll do better.
That's the golden zone, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
It really is. We love those margins.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we're pretty much all residential. I say in terms of who we're speaking to in this audience is, sub 1.5 million. And we've really designed our painting business to be optimized more so towards freedom than anything. I have a marketing company that pays my bills. I didn't need it for that. I needed something that allowed me to travel and adventure and do the things I love in my personal life, which is kind of how I've designed everything in the business, including estimating and sales and all that stuff. So
I love it. All right, Nick.
All right, so we do residential, interior, exterior, cabinet painting, and epoxy floor coatings. And I would like to speak to those of you who have been in business for less than 2 years. And for you, you're constantly trying to figure out how to price your jobs. Because I know there's a lot of people here that are maybe beyond that and they figured that out, but I want to talk to those of you that are newer to our industry.
Perfect.
I'd like to speak to everybody here. And anybody who's eager to learn how to make their projects more profitable, and both on the going in, which I'll talk about, and the going out, which is the backside of the process. So.
Yeah.
I feel confident talking to pretty much anybody at this point. You know, we had experience with both residential. Obviously, Fresh Coat at the time was primarily residential, but then we built a commercial division that went from 3 million to 20 million in size. So have experience there. I work with the members that I work with now range from nearly 100% commercial to 100% residential. So I really feel confident we're talking to anybody. So if you have a question that's regarding estimating production rates and those likes, I'm happy to answer it.
That's great. I know over the course of the last couple of days, we had some amazing breakouts from production rates to sales to how to break into commercial, all the things. So I thought I would take a little different stab at it, and maybe from overcoming challenges and some of the objections. So for those who are starting new in the room, a challenge may be getting an established set of production rates. And then the ones who are a little more seasoned, looking at the average job size, and you just can't take your eyes off commercial. You know your time is worth more than the average job size is 7,600, right? It gets a little grindy. So then you're going to chase commercial. So through all these phases of journey, there's some challenges that comes along. And this would just be kind of open mic to grab it. Would someone be willing to take about 3 minutes? Can you walk us through a particularly challenging project you've estimated, or a phase that you had to guide the business through on the side of estimating? How did you handle it?
I won't speak to a project that I've specifically estimated, but I've helped a lot of people estimate projects. And specifically when they get big projects, right? It's like, hey, maybe I'm doing $1 million in business, but a local apartment complex has 6 buildings, and I want to see if I can take a stab at that, right? So just having somebody in your corner that you can go to and say, hey, do you have experience with that? So for me, I have a background with CertaPro painters as a commercial production manager, so I've seen large-scale projects and how they're broken down to the smallest component. So when you look at an interior bedroom or just a normal exterior, sometimes you just got to take it a step at a time. How many windows are each building? How much linear feet? are on this building so you can figure out the measurements and whatnot. It's the same process, you just kind of got to break it down. So I'll give you a good resource if you do ever run into that. Google Earth has been huge for me to go over estimates with people and to give them at least a number within 10 to 15% where they can feel really confident about. And then you can work backwards on the back end and say, well, realistically, how many days, right? And then kind of compare back and forth to say, we're pretty close for the labor and the material amount. And then you can feel, hey, I did it one way, I did it another way. We can kind of meet in the middle and feel really confident. As long as my margins feel really good, we can send that.
Could I maybe call on you, Eric, to talk about your process? I don't know if you are that detailed.
Yeah, do you want me on like a specific example?
Sure.
So I think one thing like we struggled with in our virtual estimating process initially when we were really systemizing and everything is, I mean, similar to what Aiden was saying, especially on our interiors, when you start getting some of these kind of funky layout stuff, right? You got a 20-foot foyer with a spiral staircase that comes up, and what we really had to start doing was breaking things down into smaller things. So like the quick version, I'm happy to go into this more if you want, but like we basically took cabinet pricing methodology of like piece rate and pulled that into interiors, right? So we got small room, medium room, large room, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all those meet different criteria, so we can quote it just from photos virtually without having to take measurements, right? When you start getting some of these really funky shaped rooms, it's like, okay, this grand foyer is actually a medium room, a hallway, and a small room, and breaking up into smaller pieces rather than actually like taking it for what it is at face value,
Can I lean into that just a little bit more?
Please.
So it's virtual estimating. Do you have certain clauses in there that then protect you? Can you talk about that? Because I'm sure what's come to mind is, all those things you encounter when you're actually in person creating a bid. What do you do about that?
Yeah, I get asked this all the time because everybody's like, oh, well, how would you do that? You get there and it's worse than you thought, the condition, et cetera, right? I'll be honest, every now and then there's a little oopsie, but I don't think we've had more than like $100 oopsie at a certain point. Like, all right, it's not gonna make much of a difference. And yes, we do have certain things. So as we're conducting our sales process and going through the rooms and the photos they sent, we have certain language we use, like, cool, hey, is there anything we'd be able to see in here, any water damage, any crack, anything we wouldn't be able to see here in the photos, right? So that way we can pull some of that stuff out from the homeowner. We do have some contract language to protect us. We do a pre-job walkthrough, which I know a bunch of people who do in-person estimates who do this. I think it's good practice where our project manager does that. We do it immediately after the estimate, within a week, right? Nice little handoff, set proper expectations, and we go through all sorts of stuff like line placement, everything, but that also acts as a barrier in case there's anything crazy. But honestly, I can't think of any time we've had anything, like I said, more than $100 oopsie.
So would you be leaning into pre-published exclusions then that allowed you to kind of kick open the door again if you need to go for the change order or increase the scope, or at that point you just decide to eat it?
Yeah, great question. So that's where that the project manager comes out and does that pre-job walkthrough, and we do it immediately rather than, we're booked out for a month, they come out a week before the job, they come out immediately after it's sold. So if, God forbid, there is something crazy, we're coming to the client 2 days after it was sold saying, hey, sorry, our salesperson made a big mistake, as opposed to, it was sold a month ago and you're starting in a week, hey, I'm so sorry, we have to change this. And luckily, and knock on wood, it really hasn't happened much, so.
Awesome. I think this is a perfect mic pass to Chad.
Yeah. My model's a lot different, just hearing what they're saying. I'm more large-scale commercial, so we get plans and scope of work, not pictures and field measurement. So for us, it's a lot easier to deal with the elevations and things like that he's talking about. We suck everything into PlanSwift, so there's no human error at the end. If you're using scale rulers and stuff like that, I have, and it's horrible, especially on a big job. But our estimating system starts with that. We suck it into PlanSwift. The guy does the takeoff and gives me all the quantities, units, linear footage, square footage. And then it goes into an estimating system that has our production rates. We actually carry a residential production rate and a commercial production rate because they're different beasts. So different jobs require different things. We got spread rates in our system along with those production rates. So the work order the guys get has hours on it for each individual task, along with the amount of materials and so forth. So it's very clear and to the person out in the field. We give them a production packet that has all that info in it, so they're able to get through it. But it sounds like we're a different system,
I have a real appreciation for what you do.
Sure.
It's not the easiest thing out there. But I think almost before the estimating stage, what's true for all of us is there's a sales stage.
Yeah.
When I think about commercial estimating, I think about it a book. You have a front cover, the thick middle body of it, and the end cover. And the front cover is looking at those bid invites, filtering and determining, are they even worthy to get a number? And most of them, when you just say pound sand, you never pay your bills, right? There's a ton of GCs we would never want to work for. Would you talk about the bookends a little bit? Because it's such a heavy focus of estimating. But how do you protect your time after you've maybe devoted a couple days to a huge plan takeoff at the end, ensuring that you get last look? Do you mind sharing kind of the bookends?
For us at the beginning, I get tons of invitations, so in all the plan rooms, this and that. There's not a lot of communication. It's just invitations. We sift through them and decide what's good jobs for us and what isn't. Because in my area, I'm a larger painter, there's not many of us. I can take on larger projects and I have less competition. Also found in my area, nobody goes after the little small hospital jobs. So I'm pretty in tune with my area, what's going on, and long story short, to know what to bid and not to bid. I get GCs calling me and they'll ask, oh, are you putting in a number? And right then, that's the cue, no one else is bidding. So they'll even tell me that. But then you can obviously adjust your bid accordingly for that job.
Yeah.
But generally, any job that looks too risky to us for whatever reason, we'll back away. There's so much work, it's not even worth trying to fight through a difficult job anymore. I want to take the low-hanging fruit kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's amazing what we'll say yes to maybe in one of our shoulder seasons, right? Trying to keep the established crew together. So, yeah. Sometimes that's a reason why we say yes.
Yeah, at this point, and for us, I think we estimated last year, we're a $5 million company, we estimated like $33 million in work. So we go after it hard and heavy, and $50,000 to $400,000 jobs to try and keep everybody busy and constant flow of work. We never have shutdowns in the winter due to commercial painting. I know a lot of res guys struggle with that.
Yes.
This might be an area they branch off into just to fill those voids.
That's excellent. You've not been ignored.
Hi.
All right, Nick, you always have something to say.
So I wanted to talk about a project that was probably back in 2010. And again, I want to talk to the smaller contractors because this was a time we were coming out of 2008, a time of, economic hardship, right? And I had the dream job come to me. Imagine you get an email, Nick, we would like you to bid a 30,000 square foot mansion. And you first go, I was used to bidding, a big house was 5,000 square feet, right? Mm-hmm. And so we went out and saw the house. It was a mansion. It's everything that you would think. It's hard to even fathom what 30,000 square feet of a house looks like. It just literally went on forever. And then I'm like, well, that's my little sheet that I have to do estimating is not enough. And so what I would suggest you do, and this is what I did, is you just break it down to the smallest components. A room is a room. I'd been in rooms that size before. Some were big, some were small. And it was just adding up all of those rooms. The funny part about when I was doing the estimate, my family and I were getting ready to go on vacation, and we ended up going on vacation, and I had to spend 5 hours, I think we were in Orlando, working on this thing. And I ended up doing, I wanted to do a very detailed estimate. And so I literally built this ginormous spreadsheet because they wanted to know the price of every single room. Because if things changed, they wanted it to be easy. And so I can't even tell you how many pages this thing was, but when I was doing it, I focused on the room. And I made sure that I hit all of the components. We have walls, we have ceilings, we have trim, we have doors, and we have windows. I didn't have to deal with anything in the house, so that was nice. But that's what it broke down to. And then it was just adding and adding and adding. And thankfully the spreadsheet, really worked. The good news on it was, the cool part about it was I was bidding against some really big companies. And I won the bid. But I decided to not take the job because, I was worried that what if something was wrong on my bid? And it would have taken every single resource I had, and I didn't know if I had enough people to hit their timeline. And I was so excited to get the opportunity, and I'm glad I went through it. And it was the hardest call was having to call the GC and say, I'm so sorry, John, I'm gonna have to pass, and here's why. But it was a great opportunity, and I'm glad I did it.
That's pretty neat. That's wow. I'm looking at Tom and Tara here. There are some similarities. It's the approach, right? It's a little more global approach. Things that pop up, time studies, production rates. Tara, do you use capacity planning to determine your sales rate? Does that move for you? Kind of, would you speak to that side of estimating maybe?
Talking about, sorry, Annie,
Would you speak to, when we look at capacity planning and
right.
we're looking at February, and some of us in the room, we're not overly tickled with how much is sitting allocated in February that says it's revenue ready, it's ready to go, and we're stressing a little bit. We might have planned to lose money, but do we use how much work we have booked and where it's booked to influence sales rates? What does that look like?
I would say that, you're talking about sales rates and pricing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
First of all, I would recommend that you don't change your pricing, right, just because of the time of year, but you want to make sure that, obviously, whenever we're estimating, we want to make sure we have a profitable estimate, right? We have a profitable sale. But when we talk about capacity planning, I think one of the things we talked about yesterday was being able to predict seasonality, predictability, and which is, it goes right back to why do we want to use production rates? Why do we want to have a point of truth in our business, right? The more we know, the more we understand the points of truth in our business, the more predictable it is. Going all the way back to Jason's presentation on day one, you want freedom. Freedom comes from predictability. Freedom comes from being able to forecast, to know with certainty that your pricing is accurate. So I'm probably wandering off the subject a little bit, but I think this is important to understand that, guys, why do you need this point of truth? So many of us are not, the one point of truth we should have in our business is the estimate, right? It starts with a measurement or some kind of constant, Eric, that you're using, right? You have a constant, and then a production rate is a constant. So these are things that when you have these points of truth in the business, then you can build off of that. The downstream from that is now I can hold my teams accountable to productivity. I can work backwards. If something didn't come out right, I can come back and say, it's easier to determine what the error was when we're guesstimating. And even though we have a lot of experienced guesstimators in here, the bottom line is it's not a point of truth, and it's questionable, and then your teams can question you. It's, how many times do we hear, well, it's not my productivity, the estimate was wrong. It's like, I apologize, I'm wandering, but when we look at that, that's an important thing in this business, and so many of you are not there yet, and if you aren't, you got to get there. That's all I'm going to say, is that you've got to get to a point where you know with certainty, because you can't train somebody on guesstimating.
Yes.
One of the things that we had an experience with FreshCode is, like I said, we had to take people from zero and immediately be able to train them very quickly into being able to do productive estimates very fast so that they could scale. And many of you know I'm a big nerd for scaling. So you can't scale unless you have these points of truth in the business. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
That's perfect, because I think, Tara, you just set up Tom to lead maybe into more of the production side. Having super solid production rates that have been influenced by time studies, that's unique for your company, right? It wasn't just a manual picked up and said, this must be the truth for everything and all substrates. We kind of know that's going to deliver some hurt. But I think if you leaned in a little further and you had a confident estimate and it's awarded, and now it's being turned over to the field in a non-sub situation, so W-2, can you talk about what would it look like to have pushback? And if we're practicing in the field where the field is accepting the So I don't know if this is a thing where you accept the bid or you reject it. So instead of a crew leader just nodding, it's another job, 120 man hours, do they agree with that? And they should be doing a pre-job walk. And what does it look like to set up pushback that says, looks like you either missed dormers, missed some ladder moves. We got a little problem. On our best day, we're not going to hit 120. What good looks like maybe 140. Would you talk about what needs to be true to be able to have that kind of financial fitness in your business?
Yeah, I think there's one of the reasons everyone is here is to learn a lot and learn new ways to do things. And I think one of the real critical pieces here in all of this, and you started on it, is you need, and this on one job today is not the time when you're going to solve this problem. You're going to be in panic mode today if you haven't already put these things in place, and you need something, a process and a system that's predictable, repeatable, trainable, and profitable. That's got to be your process as you go through and production rates is a huge part of that to get there. The idea of the crew saying, no, hey, no way, we're not going to do that. Yeah, they should have that kind of input. But on the back end of this whole cycle, project cycle, is the validation of your production rates. So on every project, and this is why everybody talks about this, not everybody does it, you should be job costing every project, because that's the validation of your production rates. If your job costing says, hey, you hit the same gross profit number that your estimate said, then you got a working system there. And if it doesn't, that is the time. Right when that project has been completed and invoiced, it's done, you need a meeting between the estimator and the crew leaders to see what happened and have that conversation of why are we, and in some cases you might be doing way better than you thought you were gonna. What do we need to adjust? And the other side is we did way worse than we thought we were going to. Mm-hmm. But without this whole complete cycle of, yes, got to build your production rates, but your production rates have to be tempered by the experience. So when you loop back and do your job costing, that completes the cycle. Production rates are great, but if you don't validate them and prove them, then they're a good starting point, for sure. But they're not the way you're going to get scalable profitability.
Absolutely. Amy, can I talk a little bit about that? Yeah. So we use Estimate Rocket, and it's very important that everything is spelled out exactly how it's supposed to be done. What did the salesperson promised something, and then we've got a project manager in the middle, and then we've got your team. So for my team, we pay on performance. We have a percentage basis that we do. And so it's very important that we are very specific of what we are painting and what we're not painting. And if something has been missed, then the painter is pretty upset, right? Because he or she is gonna be missing out on something. And I don't care, you might be saying, well, Nick, my people are hourly. Well, if you have any kind of bonus structure, that ties back to performance and what they get compensated, you're still in the same boat as I am. And so we have a system, it always comes down to systems. We have a system that if on the first or second day, when our team goes out to go look at the project, and well, not to go look at it, but to go do the painting, they have to look over our estimate, our work order, and if they see anything that is missed, because mistakes happen, right? Then they can take it to their project managers and say, hey, I can see that we only counted 28 doors and there's 32, right? And so we have a system that allows them to check us, right? One of the things I learned recently by going to Jason Phillips's event down in Mexico, which was awesome, big plug for that, on leadership, the currency of business is trust. My team has to trust that I have their back. And so we always make sure that if we have made a mistake, they are paid for the work that they're gonna do, right? So super important.
I think I'll just lean on that, the currency of trust, taking that one step further. The strength that comes when we have very robust production rates shows up in the sales process as well. When you see the eyebrows waggling a little bit and, wow, that's like $10,000 more than I thought. And you have the ability to walk them through how you came up with the number. And there was a distinct count. There was a count per door, per window. does it feel like this about 30 minutes? And you get the nod. But if you don't have that and it's a guesstimate, that's a much tougher conversation to have on the pushback. And I think we often think about production rates is serving the field, but I think even before that, it's serving the client, that you're not winging it and you have a sense of what you said yes to. It's very good, very good.
Annie, I got one add-on thought on that, if I could. Production rates are super important. They're the foundation. But one of the things production rates should do is give the person doing the estimate the ability to observe the things that aren't covered in the production rates. There are always existing conditions or things that they observe as they're doing their estimate. If they have production rates, so they're measuring and counting primarily, it gives them a lot more time to actually look at the space and go, hey, whoa, what's that over there in that corner? Things like that, because those are the things that ultimately, if we document them during the estimating process, then A, we can get paid for them, and B, there's no huge surprise at the end of the project.
Definitely.
Can I add to this?
Now you guys are feeling a little lonely.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
feel it. I can just feel it from over here. I'm not even going to make eye contact.
Tennis.
I think a couple of us have some good stuff on this. So just on that conversation of like systems in place and quality checks from sales to production, we put a couple systems in place that were just game changers for us. One of those being when the salesperson closes the deal, they fill out a handoff form, we call it, that has all sorts of information, whatever, yes, so we can service the client in the best way, but also on how they bid the project, right? Where we can immediately, within a couple hours, quality check it and make sure this was bid accurately. The bigger one, you guys heard me talk about, like our PM going out and doing that pre-job walkthrough. One of the things on his checklist to come back to us is, because all of our stuff comes down into what we call budgeted hours, we're mostly W-2. One of the things on his checklist is to basically do an audit. Like, hey, as the production manager, do you think these budgeted hours are accurate? Right? Like you said, is it like, hey, this is budgeted for 120 and there's no way, we're on a good day, we're getting this done in 140. And that acts as that like buffer to adjust that estimating. Like, hey, shoot, maybe we did make a mistake. Hey, maybe we do need to increase our pricing on our, large rooms, trim, whatever, right? And that's helped just so much. And sometimes there is also that conversation of production always wants more hours, salespeople always want the cheapest prices. So sometimes we're pretty confident in the math. Let's see how it plays out, and it plays out just fine. But it's an amazing like check and balance system that we've had.
I think unhealthy companies don't have tension. And so it means the field is just going, I was such a pie in this guy. I think he carved out all the prep because he wanted to get a yes, right? You just have these narratives that are floating back and forth, but healthy companies have tension because sales feels pretty confident in the number they put down, and production goes, we know our stuff. So I think there's something very healthy and establishing a company so it supports that without it going angsty, but just a really good healthy tension.
And having a system to foster that.
Yes.
Right? Where that's welcomed. That feedback is
Foster
welcomed.
and reward, right?
Yep.
Reward what we want to see more of. Chad, I think this is a great segue to talk about what estimates do on the money side. When we talk about payment terms, how they protect us, a well-written estimate.
Just to fall back on that real fast.
Of course.
Hearing the production rates, this and that, I've definitely had conversations with guys in the field, and our estimate breaks down each individual task. So, I don't know if I can get it done. And then I start talking to them, it looks like you got 4 hours to lay drop cloths and tape. And then you start going through each individual item. By the time you're done talking, they're like, oh yeah, I can do it. But all those facts had to be presented.
Yes.
So I know Aiden had something, I don't.
So kind of going back to like job costing too, I say your production rates estimating is like the brother to job costing, right? They go hand in hand. But like, can I get a show of hands? How many people are comfortable showing their workers, supervisors, or subs the actual cost of the job? It's a good amount. But the production rate estimating allows you to have that confidence to say, I can have these candid conversations and also build in incentives if they do beat the hours. So it's like a superpower that you have. So if you want trust in your business, you want transparency across the board, not only can you do that with your crew members, you can also go to the sales table and explain line by line the estimate to your customer on why you are where you're at with the price, right? I had an email battle with somebody that said I was $3K higher than the last bid for a full exterior repaint. And the cool thing is I was like confident that he was wrong and I was right? So I had to kind of go to bat for myself, but in a way that was very transparent and on the same page with them to build that trust and credibility. And across the board, they seen that, okay, he has his stuff together, we're going to trust you and get the higher price.
I like it. Maybe we bounce back to Chad again. I think it's great to story form this just a little bit. You could talk about either a lesson learned or a success in the language that you put in an estimate that protected your payment terms. Do you mind just touching on that a little bit? Because that there's a big leap between residential and commercial when it comes to that. And maybe speak to a little bit some of those boilerplate contracts that come out, how they can be challenged. Sometimes we don't need to accept what they put on there. Paid when paid. Let's have a throwdown.
Yeah, the contracts can be overwhelming sometimes, 60 pages. Quite frankly, nobody goes through all of it, I don't believe. I'm dealing with a nightmare right now, so this is the horror story of it. I didn't have one of those big contracts, and we had my contract just signed. Long story short, I'm in a court case for $100,000 that a guy didn't pay me. So it's all due to some wording and things like that. So that's a nightmare. We've went back through and revamped our contracts and put things in there. But once lawyers get a hold of stuff, know that what you think is probably not true. If you haven't never talked to a lawyer, you'll understand what I'm saying then, because I had no clue. So we've put things in place to protect that right now. But most of our contracts, we didn't have a problem with it. They're huge contracts. They're not pay upon paid. They're 30 days, so by the 20th of every month you submit, you get paid by the 30th. Anybody I see pay upon paid throws a red flag to me. I'm right now in the same process with what she's talking about. I've carried $75,000 job for 2 years. Ooh. Now, the contractor has now agreed to give me 10 grand a month for the next, so there's some nightmare stuff if you're not prepared for that. So the contracts are super important. The words, mainly contracts, the words don't mean anything at the end when you go to court. So
the really golden zone of those repaint commercial is being able to really have much better control over the payment terms. That seems to be a huge distinction between new and repaint.
Yeah, I don't do commercial repaints very often. Like I said, I wish I could break into that, but
I think it's Brandon Lewis you need to talk to. Were you
just went to his class.
Something showed up on my phone that said you're kind of, you're the guy for that. Yeah.
We were in his class. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
That's great.
But most of ours are new construction, commercial work under GCs, not under owners. So that's a whole different beast too.
Yeah. Well, I think there's an incredible amount of knowledge on this stage. One of the intentions was to have a runner with a mic and be able to get some questions from the audience. And
on production rate estimating, when you're doing a bigger job, will you cut down the price if it's going to take longer, or if it's truly production rate, are you shooting yourself in the butt by doing that?
In my estimating system that I use, it has an adjustment factor of 10%. I can go up to 30 or down to 30, and I adjust that based on my experience as a painter in the field for a degree of difficulty of whatever we're doing. So some of that is based on experience, not, I don't know how an estimator, they might struggle through that a little bit, not knowing the process of putting, of a certain project. So we raise our production rates if it's difficult and lower it if it's easier. We use all kinds of crazy tools too, power rollers, jet rollers, to make up for that kind of stuff.
I'll say one thing to that. You definitely don't want to manipulate the estimate. You want to get the true hours and material cost, but you can look at it and say, okay, if this is a cash cow job, right, maybe I lower my margin because that's a big opportunity. It would be a big win for our business. You just have to make sure that makes sense for you and where you're at.
I'll comment real quick. Our average job size is like $4,500, or I'm sorry, it's $5,400 this last year. And so we don't do a lot of big projects. One thing I have found that in the past, when I used to do a lot of big projects, you'd miss something. And so I'm going to have more of the tendency, if I'm doing a bigger project, I will add items to kind of, I don't want to say pad it, but just in case I've missed something. But I always notate it in our notes so that our guys know, oh, I added another $1,000 for this area because of blah, 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 in case we have some issues. But I'm never going to go, oh, this is a huge job. I'm going to give them a huge discount because this is a big opportunity. So no.
And I just think it's really critical that you know your numbers, then make your adjustments at the end if you need to.
Yeah, and I would say don't change your production rates, but you've got to look at your markup depending on the, and say bigger project is bigger risk at some, so there's two sides of that, right? So there's an economy of scale. Each project you work on has some amount of administrative cost, regardless of whether it's a $1,000 project or a $10,000 project or a $100,000 project. You have load in time, load out time, things that are really application related that you need to consider when you're doing your bid. So yes, if you have a project that's going to be a lot more efficient because it's a bigger project, yes, you might be able to lower your markup a little bit. But at the end of the day, don't change your production rates. Your production rates are your production rates.
I have found maybe a third angle to look at it. Sometimes it's an option, like if you're bidding an HOA and you have multiple buildings, you might bid a lower margin on that first building because you're planning to gain some efficiencies and the team is really in step. They're going to be planted there for 6-7 weeks. There's a synergy that happens. You can load 8-9 guys on there. So there's maybe a little more that comes into play that the fatigue of scheduling all that on a scheduler, on a production coordination side, isn't there. You have that covered. And so sometimes we have to buy ourselves zone where we're going to negotiate it with ourselves a little bit.
I just had a quick question about maybe offering financing to win more jobs. Sometimes we might outprice customers and they want to get the work, but they can't afford it. But if there's maybe a financing option, do you guys recommend anything like that?
Was that Roberto?
Yes.
It's dark back there. That's awesome.
We do have that option. We use a company called Enhancify. We don't end up using them a ton. I would love it if it was used more. I think it's partly because of the target market that we have. Most people will just put it on their credit card or just pay for it with a check or whatever. We have not seen. I've offered financing for a long time. We have not seen a lot of engagement with it. We are heading into the exterior space though now, and
oh wow! Wait, I think I could resurrect some posts on Facebook.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
That you have declared to all of us.
Yeah, don't do that.
That I don't think you call us idiots.
Hush, woman.
But
hush.
Just saying.
But I think I don't remember where I heard it, but I've heard it.
Is this a I don't recall statement? Is that what I hear?
Needs selling versus want selling. That might also be a Jason Phillips thing that I learned. And so when we're having to go out and do estimates for exterior, that's going to be a needs-based sale. And so we may see an uptick with the financing on that.
Hey, thanks for taking that very well.
Hey, Annie, just some statistics from my Freshcoat days. Our financed projects, average project size was almost $2,000 higher than our non-financed ones. Just a quick little interesting number, right?
Was that the Dave Ramsey effect? I'm just curious.
So we could do a better job of selling it, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's just different when you peel it away in cash, right? That just feels different. All right. Are there more questions?
Other questions? Guys?
Way at the front. You're going to run after that one.
Oh, we got one up front? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you. My question, so I had a nightmare scenario where we got into a big old mansion, paint and trim. He's a friend, so I thought it'd be okay. And we're just painting and trim for days. I had a production rate that I thought was fairly reasonable. Then we got in there and all of the trim was actually like stained first and we wanted to paint it. So that was variable number one. Yay, first year of business. Variable number two was that the carpenter wasn't done installing it because they had flooring, which now means quarter round. So what we did paint got nice and hammered. That's variable two. And then after that, well, I guess the big variable was like production rate on transitioning into paint. But moving forward, okay, now knowing now what I do, how do I put together a production rate based on 3 different variables that usually only happen once a year, but I still want to be able to gauge that and come up with something that I can still plug in and give to another salesman that knows nothing and say, use this when this happens.
Yeah, I'll go real quick and then pass it to you. Again, my estimating system's a little different where I'm going more like piece pricing with interiors, but that kind of ultimately falls back to production rate still, right? Because that pricing for that medium room is equated to a certain amount of hours we're going to allocate towards that, right? So it basically still comes down to production rates. How we do that is we have like 3 tiers for everything. We call normal, heavy, very heavy, right? And then we have criterias that move it up a tier. So if we had trim and we knew we needed to caulk all of it, we'd go up to heavy for that room and that trim. And that increases then our rate for that, which gives us more allotted hours for that. So in a slightly different adjacent system, that's how we've done it and kept it simple and easy.
Yeah, back to the, as simple as you possibly can get it. It sounded like you went in and you thought it was going to be one thing and then it was double the work, right? So let's just say your linear feet for baseboard for 2 coats for painting is 40, per hour, right? 40 linear feet. If I know it's going to be double the work, drop that to 20, right? Because I have to do double the work now. And now you're adding caulk and whatnot. Maybe I drop my spread rate as well because it's going to have a little bit more material. So I might not itemize every little thing like, oh, we add caulk and we ballpark the caulk. I kind of want to integrate it all into one. That's my preference. I like to keep it as simple as possible. And then now, because production rates can act like a menu, I can basically add something that says, stain, trim, plus caulk. And then that's my rates that I run with, as long as you job cost and make sure it's accurate.
Potentially another area to look at would be to make sure it's specified the sequencing of the job. It's a mansion. There's probably a series of various trades in there, and it's a mansion mindset. In the 18-year history, I have a mansion I admired as a child. It's a beautiful home on the edge of the golf course. And I don't admire it anymore because we didn't make any stinking money. Yes, we got on the front page of the newspaper because it was really cool, but it doesn't look the same to me because of that. But some of the lessons is thinking almost a little bit in the commercial range of, let's go lock this in. So if they change the terms, you have the ability to go back and revisit it. And I think this is also where the PCA standards would aid as well. Definitely, this is a helpful thing.
Annie, can I add to you? I'm going to back you up and say, yes, I agree with Annie. I think it's...
Whoa.
Yeah. And I'm going to say that it really comes down to defining the scope precisely. And I think this is a big problem in our industry, that people are too vague with their estimates. And so you have to have precise wording. What are we painting? How many coats? What's the product? What's the conditions? This isn't, I'm going to have an example that it's something, we started doing tile backsplashes. And so to make things simple, we only price out to a customer a subway tile backsplash. But then we define and say, if it changes in any way from that scope, the price will change. And so if you do that, then you will have the opportunity to go back and say, this is what I bid, and now it's this. And so this is the new price.
Right. Just one more thing to add to that. If what you're describing is something that is going to happen on even a seasonal basis, I'd create another line item for that particular thing with that built into the description of it that has whatever production rate you need. And that way you do 2 things. You call out the difference between the normal thing that you're expecting and this exceptional thing that's happening. And then you're covered because you've got that definition in your, built into your scope.
Question?
I have a little different take on that. As a painter and an estimator, I run into this all the time in commercial because that's the way it goes. We try to first change our process a little bit before we go after change orders. You start banging people with change orders left and right, you're leaving a bad taste in their mouth. So the scenario you're talking about, I deal with it all the time. we generally one coat the trim, walk away. After the flooring and everything gets installed, we come back and second coat it, so we're not worried about it getting beat up. So I try to think outside of the box as far as all that stuff. There does come a point, to your point, that where you got to go to them and say, hey, this is a little bit out of control, and have a conversation. But if you bring up that you've already tried to remedy it on your own, that conversation is going to go a whole lot easier. They're going to be more willing to give you the money, and it's not a fight.
I would maybe add one more thing on there. Don't downplay that we're in the coating and paintings industry. We know what we do really, really well. And many times when we're standing in that situation, they need the advising on how it should go. Mr. Carpenter over there, what does he know? But if you know what you know, speak with authority. And you speak out of, I want to make sure we're protecting your scope. This could really go out of hand if you let X, Y, and Z. Those are other trades. So give them the recipe for what success looks like, and they then feel like you're a partner.
Yes, you mentioned standards, or PCA standards. I'm old.
Did I say PDCA?
I did.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
PCA standards. I've painted the big mansion, and I made reference to them in my contract. Is that enough, or should I physically give them a copy of the standards and have them sign off on it, or is that going too far?
For me, I actually put a couple of them in my contract also. So that's for smaller jobs where I'm not dealing with the big GCs. I think I put the 39-inch one and damage from other trades, because those are the two big ones. I bring it up right out of the gate and let it be known, and when it happens, I just refer back to that, and it's all change orders from there. But I agree, if you don't have a conversation about it in the beginning, it's like a surprise to them. So.
We have it in our contracts. We don't necessarily bring it up proactively. We're all residential. I might be butchering, but I think Slavic at one point said, like, customers typically want 80% of the quality and standard we're actually painting to. I've found that to be incredibly, incredibly true, and that they don't really care as long as it meets their expectations. And we'll just reference back to that contract if we ever had a real bad situation where it needed to come up.
And I think it's okay to profile our clients. If they're an attorney, they have their nose stuck in a book, they're a nuclear engineer, like, we can have a profile of beware. Does that make sense? And they'll want all the spec sheets, because it's super exciting. They're getting their house painted, and 4 pages of small print is just pure bliss. But those typically can also be troublemakers, right? So there might be a PETA tax. It's not a line item that shows up, but it might be there.
I've had an instance where I put that in my contract. We came to a house, and the lady, the next morning, she had a list of stuff to touch up, but there was a magnifying glass on our ladder. So we had to talk about that, you know. So.
Yeah. And take the halogen home with you. Don't leave the blue tape there, right? We're just wrapping up. Thank you for everyone who has been able to just contribute freely. I'm so incredibly proud seeing how big this room has filled. And one of the things that makes me smile, I'm going to totally age myself, way back in the day on my first PCA, we had a feeling, it was great sharing, it was great to meet others in the industry, to not have that competitive feeling. But there wasn't this level of open book sharing and free knowledge as we experience here today. And I'm just so proud of all that. Proud of each one of you on here. Thank you for sharing.
This content is brought to you by the PCA and the PCA Education Foundation, with help from our national champions, Benjamin Moore and Sherwin Williams, and the PCA's 2025 industry partners.